Well, the experience was great, actually. I learned a heck of a lot. How I got to be in that role of co-campaign manager was I helped Leanne Dalzell with her re-election campaign 3 years ago. And following that, Leanne's campaign chair was Gary Moore at the time, and he said, "What are you doing now?" And I said, "Well, I'm probably going to figure out how to do my role as a community board member, because I'd just been elected at that election as well." And he said, "Well, have you heard of this guy called Duncan Webb?" And I went, "Well, yeah, I have. I saw him talk at the Transitional Cathedral at an EQC Fix evening, and I kind of hadn't heard of it. Well, I'd maybe seen the name before, but I hadn't heard him talk before. And I kind of wondered why this guy was in a suit and wearing a swan dry." And I said, "Well, look, hey, I'd be very happy to meet him. I haven't been a party political person at all, so please take that on board. I've never been never been out there knocking on doors for any kind of political campaign. It had just been Leanne's campaign that I'd helped out with. And as long as we get along, I'd be happy to help out where I can and try and fit in. That'd be fantastic." So that's kind of where it all started.
Now, I'm speaking here on After Dark with Aaron Campbell, who's an ECan candidate. It's one thing supporting a candidate; it's entirely another to stand. Did people come to you and
Absolutely.
say, "Hey, you should be standing"? How did you feel about that?
Well, that was the thing. When I became a community board member. To be honest, I wasn't expecting to be elected that time. One of the reasons why I helped out Leanne was to, I guess, get a little bit of insight into local body politics, with the intention of running in 2019 for the first time. But after kind of shadowing Leanne for a couple of months there, I got what I'd call a really good insight. At that level of community engagement across the city. I was really encouraged by not only what I'd seen and what I heard, but then it was 3 days before the close of nominations. There was no one else running for what was then the new ward of Harewood. And I asked my wife first of all, and then I asked Leanne, "What do you think? Should I run for community board?" And they said, "Yeah, you'd be great." So I kind of dived in head first into that aspect of it. So when I was elected, it was a matter of just, I guess, following my nose, following my passion. And certainly it's really community focused, which is, I guess, that's what I love about the role. And the best part about community board, I guess, is if you're interested in finding out stuff, you can find out stuff. And be engaged and be busy, and you can really enjoy the process. You can learn a whole lot about not only what's happening in your area that you're representing, but you can find out a whole lot more about what's happening across the city, whether it's over in Banks Peninsula, Sumner, or in coastal Burwood area and things like that. That's been all part of the learning process. And so then following on from that has been, I guess, the people seeing the work that I've been doing, and they've gone, "Well, hey, you're doing pretty well there. And what's the next step? Are you going to run for council? Are you going to run for ECan?" Those are the questions that were being asked of me, and it took, I guess, a little while to decide on which avenue to settle on. But what I've decided was that ECan and the decisions, particularly around water in Canterbury, are so important right now, with the return to full democracy for a fully democratically elected Environment Canterbury Council that's coming up this year. Having people that are strong and passionate about their community and will not only advocate for their local community, but then take a view of governance across a province that is the size of Switzerland. It's 45,000 square kilometres. There's 10 different water zones and catchment zones, so there's a lot of differences between those areas, and that it's important that not only do you focus on what you kind of need to in your local area and advocate for that, but you need to step back and go, well, hang on, what's also happening here in South Canterbury or in North Canterbury? What's happening in Huranui and Kokora?
Can I just ask you about the workload now? Community board. It can be quite, fulfilling and quite engaging and take up a lot of time. How did that dovetail with your profession or what you were doing for a living at community board level?
Pretty good. I've been fortunate to be self-employed now for 12, 13 years, and so with the community board work, I've just been able to schedule when I need to turn up for different board priorities and events around my work, and it's been quite good in that way. It's been I guess I've been very fortunate in that regard. So there was a briefing to community board members. It was a combined community board seminar on the integrated, or the draft integrated water strategy last Friday. It was held at 11 a.m. till 12. There was about a dozen different elected members there, both of community board level and of at the council level as well, along with certain staff. And knowing that there's probably over 30 community board members, and there's 16 councillors, and obviously the mayor as well. Knowing that there's about a third of those elected members turning up for that briefing, it's kind of heartening to see that engagement. But at the same time, I do know that, particularly for that draft water, that integrated water strategy, there's been actually really low public engagement around that for probably various reasons.
Well, listeners will be interested. Listeners will be interested, Aaron, in what do you do for your self-employment? What do you bring to the job?
Well, currently I do photography, of all things. I was in hospitality for 20 years. I lived overseas for about 9. I was living in Japan for approximately 6 of those years. I was in London for a couple. So, from a public transportation point of view, I never actually owned a car until I was 34 years old. Although I was driving, because I grew up on a farm since I was about 6. And so the perspective that I bring is I have experience in both large multinational, international companies, down to running my own small business, based out in Kaiapoi. As I mentioned, I grew up on a farm, so my parents had a small sheep farm down just north of Invercargill. So again, that really close community aspect to it. Of growing up in a small rural community was absolutely fantastic.
Can you bring us up to date? Sorry, Aaron, obviously we can't see each other, so it's a bit difficult to converse sometimes, but can you bring us up to date with what's happening with this decision to increase the allowance for nitrate in the Waimak?
Yes, so that you've got Plan Change 7 that's coming out for public consultation around, it's just over a week away, I'd say. And within that, there's 2 aspects of it. There's a decision. Well, part of that consultation will be around some decisions around South Canterbury, but the one that's going to be affecting Christchurch is around it's particularly the nitrates in the nitrate leaching that can happen within the Waimakariri zone. And because Christchurch is on one side of the river, the Waimakariri zone is on the other. The Christchurch City Council can't make kind of a direct submission. It's not it has a lot of interest in it, but it's not kind of like a primary party as such. So it has to submit along with everybody else. But this is the good thing. The good thing about it is that anyone in Christchurch can submit to this as well, and that's where I'm sure that there will be a lot of encouragement from a wide range of people to get public feedback and input into this decision to potentially allow an increasing level of nitrate in water.
So it's not a done deal then?
It's not a done deal. The report goes out, as I said, for public consultation, and then it will be put to an independent hearings panel, and then the decision of the hearings panel will come back to what will be a democratically elected Environment Canterbury Council in the next term. So that'll be really interesting to see what that recommendation will be and how the council will decide on that. Are
you politically aligned or standing as an independent? What's going on?
I'm an independent.
Oh, that's interesting, because I would have thought you'd been a kind of green Labour type person from what I've noted, what I've seen of your activity.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. 10 years ago, I was supporting the National Party particularly when I was in the hospitality industry, running a small business. I was in favour of when the 90-day trial period came in as an employer. I found that to be a a very good decision when it came to the law. I know that the Labour Party, kind of philosophically are opposed to that. And then, I guess, going through the earthquakes and the recovery or lack of, or however you want to view that, my views on what the government was doing changed. My job now, or my business now as a photographer, I get to see housing and the quality of housing, or the poor state of the quality of housing sometimes all over Christchurch. I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years, and unfortunately the state of housing in Christchurch is not that good. And not only are you talking about the effects of the earthquake and poor quality repairs, but just the standard of housing in general. And this is probably one of the things that got me really interested in politics, was around the idea of healthy homes, and the consequences of that regarding human health and well-being.
Yeah, yes, that's obviously the housing thing's a huge subject. I don't want to get buried too much in that now.
Sure.
You've mentioned water, and obviously public transport is a big ECan remit. What do you think about the complete denial that rail should be in the mix when we have an existing rail network?
That's an interesting one. I took part in the Chat Club, which is the Canterbury Housing and Transport kind of discussion group. There was up to, I'd say, 30 people coming in and out of those discussions over the past 5 or 6 months, and where we looked at various options of increasing the capacity of mass transit in and around Christchurch and the greater Christchurch area, and the peak morning level traffic, the congestion was basically removed for a couple of weeks.
Right.
So,
unfortunately,
some of that congestion.
Sorry, Aaron. Unfortunately, we lost camera for about the last 5 minutes of your conversation, but the audio could still be heard. So my apologies about that. And what I'd like to do is get you back on the program at some stage. Mm-hmm. Now we've got about is it about 8 to 10 weeks to go before the elections? Something like that.
It's the 12th of October, which is the poll day itself. So that's just under 3 months now. So it's the 14th of July today.
So still plenty of time.
You're looking at 12 weeks there. Absolutely.
Well, righty-ho. Aaron Campbell, best wishes to you for the election, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. That's great. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Bye.
Right, very shortly we'll have Sheena Heemans on from Maison de Crepes. We can find out about what's happening there down on St Asaph Street, I think it is. We'll be back shortly here on After Dark.